So I intend to keep my word, and I intend to hold him to his. Yesterday, the White House made clear the president opposes piecemeal appropriations that neglect border security and would veto them. So obviously that isn't going to become law. So this proposal flunks the Democratic leader's own test of a few days ago. So look, the political stunts are not going to get us anywhere. Senate Democrats should stop blocking the Senate from taking up other urgent matters, like the pending bills concerning Israel and the Syrian civil war. In previous government shutdowns, the Senate's done business. What we ought to be doing, and actually at the same time negotiate with the president on border security, because nothing else is going to get a solution. Therefore, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President, if I could just very briefly, I'm extremely disappointed. I can assure you, the majority leader, this is not a showboat issue with 800,000 federal workers being denied their paycheck. The last time I checked the Constitution, we are a co-equal branch of government, and we should act as a co-equal branch of government and pass legislation that's overwhelmingly supported by this body.
Majority Leader.
Colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle apparently have pledged to oppose proceeding to other important bills. We've experienced that, at least to this point, during this government shutdown, even though there's no precedent for that. All but four yesterday voted against the motion to proceed to S1, and I'm assuming we'll vote against it again this afternoon. S1, the bill they're preventing us from going to, has wide bipartisan support, is a critical step in supporting our allies in the Middle East and securing peace in Syria. I've talked to many Americans who are intensely interested in the Israel issues. They don't understand why this important legislation be stymied over a dispute over something entirely different. So, Madam President, through the chair, I would ask Senator Cardin if this blockade against business on the floor is absolute.
Madam
Without
President,
objection, the senator from Maryland may respond.
I might return the question, ask the distinguished majority leader whether his objections to reopening government with action we've already taken previously is absolute. I can assure the majority leader that it's my commitment to our federal workers and to our country that the first order of business here should be the reopening of government. There's other important issues that we need to do that I strongly support. I, quite frankly, do not understand the majority leader's position as to why he would deny us a vote on reopening government that passed this body unanimously in the past.
Madam President, I would say to my friend from Maryland, I'll repeat the question in a minute, but the answer to his question of me is because this will not produce a result. It's been perfectly clear that the only way to produce this result is for the President, the Speaker of the House, and the Minority Leader to agree, because we need votes from Democrats, both in the Senate and the House, in order to pass a measure that the President will sign. But my question of the Senator from Maryland was, is this blockade against business on the floor absolute?
Madam President?
Senator from Maryland.
And of course, I would repeat my request to the distinguished majority leader whether his objections are absolute. Let me just point this out. We passed the bill that I ask unanimous consent. Basically, that's been passed near unanimously by this body. 92-6 for these appropriations passed. The last time I checked the Constitution, that's enough even for a veto override. I don't think anything has changed. These bills have nothing to do, zero to do, with Homeland Security wall issue. Zero. So why doesn't our distinguished majority leader, as the leader of a co-equal branch of government, allow us to speak on behalf of our responsibilities under Article 1 of the Constitution, let us take our action that we can take right now, today, at this very moment, and pass 6 appropriation bills where there's no controversy whatsoever in this body.
As I've said, Madam President, repeatedly, it won't solve the problem because the President's made it clear he won't sign them. So let me try again. Let me try one more time. Does the Senator, through the chair, does the Senator intend to vote against proceeding to other measures?
Senate will come to order.
We have order in the Senate. Does the Senator intend to vote against proceeding to other measures during the government shutdown?
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, my first order of priority right now, since we can do this at this very moment, is to reopen government. It's outrageous that government is closed. People's lives are being affected every minute. I just heard yesterday of a layoff of another 180 jobs in my state because the Department of Agriculture is closed. We have an important economic development program in Baltimore that HUD can't act on the papers right now that's being delayed. To me, that's something we can get done right now. And as a senator from Maryland, I'm going to use every opportunity I can to reopen government in a responsible manner. And I am disappointed that the majority leader is not using the opportunity that we have right now to pass 6 appropriation bills that are not in controversy. If the majority leader could answer for me, why are we holding up these 6 bills that have nothing to do with the central debate argument? We can put enough votes on the board to show the President of the United States he doesn't have the support in the Senate, and we have the votes to override his veto. To me, that should be our first order of business.
So, Madam President, I think since the Senator from Maryland is unwilling to answer my question, the assumption should be, and I say this to the broad pro-Israel community in America that we all interact with on issues related to the U.S.-Israel relationship, the Senator is saying he might well vote to proceed to something else, but not vote to proceed to these important Israel bills and this important Syria bill. So I just want to make sure everybody understands where we are. The Senator is refusing to answer the question as to whether or not this blockade against Senate business applies to everything or just to these pro-Israel bills. So I think the refusal to answer provides the answer for our colleagues. We could, I assume, anticipate that Democrats will try to get votes on other matters during the government shutdown, but just not the Israel issue and the Syria issue.
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
I will express my views on issues. I don't need the majority leader trying to express how I will vote on future issues. I'll answer the people of Maryland on how I will act on issues that are brought before the Senate. My top priority right now is to reopen government, and I'm very disappointed that the majority leader will not allow us to act as a co-equal branch of government.
Would my colleague from Maryland yield? I would just say 3 words to my friend, the majority leader. Open the government. It's in your hands. I yield the floor.
So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent. Through the chair, I have a question of Senator Van Hollen. Or he's going to propound, I'm sorry, he's going to propound a consent agreement.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, I think we all know that the Constitution of the United States under Article 1 says that the Senate and the House of the United States are separate and co-equal branches of government with the executive branch. We are now seeing more and more Americans hurt every day by the government shutdown, Americans losing access to services. We just saw that the Food and Drug Administration has stopped routine food safety inspections of seafood. We just saw that the EPA has halted one of the federal government's most important public health activities, the inspection of federal factories, power plants, oil refineries, water treatment plants. 800,000 federal employees are not getting paid. Hundreds of thousands of them are going to work every day, including at our border, protecting our border, not getting paid. Hundreds of thousands more have been locked out of work. There's a Maryland mom who just had to go on the internet to set up a GoFundMe account to help pay her son's college tuition because they're on a monthly installment plan. I talked to the head of a community college in Maryland just the other day, went to see her, asked how were things. The first thing she told me, her phone had been ringing off the hook all morning because the parents of students of the community college weren't going to be able to make their monthly installment payments. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees are one paycheck away from not being able to pay their mortgage or their rent. And tomorrow, hundreds of thousands of them are not going to get a paycheck. So to the majority leader, I would just say we should not be contracting out our constitutional responsibilities to any president. Certainly not a president who said he's proud to shut down the government of the United States. There's nothing to be proud of in denying important services and putting 800,000 people without a paycheck. I don't think any of us should be proud of that. And we shouldn't be contracting out our responsibilities to the President of the United States. We should vote on these measures that we've already voted for. Senator Cardin just asked us to vote on this at the Senate desk. It's been supported in various ways by a bipartisan majority right here in the United States Senate. I have in my hand H.J. Res 1. This is also on the Senate calendar. It is identical with respect to the Department of Homeland Security as the measure that this Senate passed just a few weeks ago. Let's reopen the Department of Homeland Security at current funding levels till February 8th. In fact, if I recall, that was the majority leader's legislation. We passed it overwhelmingly here on a bipartisan vote. The House, 1 week ago, as their first order of business, they passed this bill and the bill that Senator Cardin asked us to vote on. This bill to open up the Department of Homeland Security as we negotiate the issue of border security, and there is no dispute over whether or not we need border security. Of course we need secure borders. The issue is over the most effective and smart way to accomplish that. And so now this bill is right back in our possession. It's on the calendar. And the question is, why are our colleagues on the Republican side refusing to allow a vote on the very bill they proposed in this body just a few weeks ago? And how can you justify to the American people that you're not going to vote on something you yourself proposed as the first order of business here in the United States Senate when people are losing those services, losing public safety protections, and 800,000 federal employees are not being paid? So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 6, H.J. Res 1, making further continuing appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security. I further ask that the joint resolution be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Object. Madam President.
Objection is heard.
I'll not prolong this because I know a lot of my Democrat colleagues are on the floor and may want to speak. But there are two shutdowns going on here. The second shutdown going on that, as far as my research can discover, is rather unprecedented. The Senate itself is being shut down because of our colleagues on the other side refusal to do business here in the Senate during this period. There's no precedent for that. There's no reason for that. We're all here. And the bill that they're refusing to let us get on relates to Israel, our great friend Israel, and addresses the atrocities that have been occurring in Syria. And I'm having a hard time understanding why the Senate should be shut down as well as the government. We're all here. In fact, attendance looks pretty good. And I don't know why we can't process bills that the vast majority of us support. I had hoped to pass all of these bills at the end of last session. We had some last-minute objections. And yeah, I would say they were on our side, and so we were unable to do it. But the vast majority of members of the Senate do want to process these bills. So I would hope, no matter how you view the government shutdown, that there's no real significant reason to shut down the Senate. I yield the floor.
President? Madam President?
Senator from Maryland.
We're clearly not shut down. We're all here. I would say to the majority leader, if you go to a lot of federal agencies right now, no one's there. They are shut down. They can't do the work of the American people, which is why the FDA is no longer doing important food inspections on seafood. It's why the EPA is not being able to inspect major polluters to protect the public health. We're open. All we're saying is we want our first order of business to be to also open the 8 of 9 federal departments who have nothing to do with a wall or border security. The EPA's work has nothing to do with a wall. The work that FDA does on food inspection has nothing to do with a wall. So pass the measures that have already been agreed to here in the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis. Open those 8 of 9 departments at funding levels that the Senate supported to the end of the fiscal year. And then with the Department of Homeland Security, do exactly what the majority leader proposed right here, in which we supported just a few weeks ago. So we can work with the president. I mean, he walked out the other day, but we'd like to work with the president to resolve that. What we're saying is we are open, and we want to focus on the urgent business of reopening the rest of the federal government, both to provide the American people with the services that they've paid for and to make sure that federal employees don't go without paychecks. And I will tell you, your phones will all be ringing off the hook tomorrow when federal employees begin to miss that first paycheck. I will tell you, GS2s, GS3s in the federal government, they are one paycheck away from not being able to pay their bills. And on top of that, you've got small businesses all over the country. I've heard from my Republican colleagues, small businesses that contract with the federal government, they are being squeezed. One in the state of Maryland, nonprofit small business, laid off 173 people just yesterday. And the federal contractors' employees, they're not coming to work. They're shut out. And they're not getting paid. So this is having an increasingly harmful effect every day on people throughout the country. And we have it in our power today to vote on bills we've already voted for in the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis to reopen. We should not be accomplices to the shutdown the president said he would be proud of. We should say today we're proud to cast our first vote, as the House did, to reopen the federal government and get people back to work.
Morning business is closed under the